The red jet of spray cuts across the wall like fresh blood. Marcus paints fast, as if every second were a challenge to the whole world. The century-old wall, the pride of the neighborhood, crumbles under his forbidden art, and before he can finish, a hoarse voice behind him cuts through the silence. Drop that can now. If that scene already made your heart race, wait until you see what's going to happen to Marcus. Like and subscribe now, because what comes next may completely change the way you see second chances. Marcus Brown gripped the spray can so hard his fingers went numb. The harsh hiss of paint cut through the stillness of the Cleveland night like a blade, spreading bright red over the century-old wall. The cold wind burned his face and a light drizzle began to fall, making the surface slippery. Each stroke felt less like an attack on the wall and more like a challenge to the entire world. He knew that building, abandoned for years, was seen as a neighborhood symbol, a piece of history the old residents still defended with pride. But for Marcus, who slept under bridges and ate when he could, it was just another wall, and he was determined to leave his mark on it. That's when he heard footsteps, steady, unhurried, coming from behind. Not the steps of someone afraid, but of someone who knew exactly where they were going. Marcus didn't stop. 2 more long strokes, the spray hissing in the air. "Drop that can now," said a deep, hoarse voice loaded with authority. Marcus turned slowly. In front of him, a tall man in a heavy coat, short gray hair, stared at him with unflinching, light-colored eyes. His face bore the marks of time, but no softness. He wasn't there to chat. "Do you have any idea what you're doing?" the man asked, without raising his voice. Marcus squeezed the spray trigger and left a red blotch over the previous stroke. A silent answer. "This building isn't just brick," the man continued, taking a step forward. "It saved more people than you could imagine, and you decided your anger is worth more than that." "It's just a wall," Marcus muttered, his voice almost swallowed by the rain. The man let out a short, humorless laugh. "A wall? Kid, this place was built by people who fought with their own hands to give their children something better. And while you're wrecking it, there are kids sleeping on the ground, dreaming of having a place like this." Marcus wanted to reply but had nothing ready. He just held his gaze, trying not to show intimidation. The man then introduced himself. "Patrick Sullivan. I take care of this building. And from now on, I'm taking care of what you're going to do with the rest of your night." He pulled a key ring from his pocket but didn't hand it over. He just held it, letting it jingle slightly, like a test. "You've got 2 options. Drop that crap and come with me now, or you'll end up in the backseat of a squad car before sunrise." Marcus stood still, sizing the man up. Patrick didn't move, didn't blink, left no room for negotiation. The sound of rain on metal and concrete seemed louder. Finally, Marcus let the can fall, hitting the asphalt with a dry clatter. Patrick nodded toward the building's gate. "Move." Inside, the air smelled of old wood and dust, but there was something else. The muffled warmth of a space that, despite its abandonment, still held memories. The walls of the main hall were covered in old photographs, newspaper clippings, and paintings. Marcus looked around, trying not to show interest, but his eyes stopped on a black and white photo. A smiling young woman, paint stains on her hands, holding a brush in front of a mural. Patrick noticed and stepped closer. That woman helped get dozens of kids off the streets, including me when I was younger. And you know the irony? Patrick looked straight at Marcus. "She wasn't much older than you when she started." Marcus looked away. Patrick took a step closer, closing the distance between them. "You think you're invisible, kid. That what you do doesn't matter. But I saw you today. And if you come back tomorrow at 8 in the morning, maybe I'll still want to see you again." He stepped back, opened the door, and left Marcus free to go. The rain was falling harder now. Passing the unfinished wall, Marcus felt as if it, with its interrupted strokes, was watching him. In his pocket, the metallic sound of a keyring Patrick had slipped into his hand without a word. And the question that kept pounding in his head as he walked into the darkness was, why on earth had that man, who could have crushed him in seconds, given him a chance? The next morning, Marcus woke to the metallic sound of a passing train. He was curled up under the awning of a closed store, his thin coat soaked from the night's rain. The keyring Patrick had given him was in his hand, cold, as if the metal carried the weight of a decision he didn't want to make. 8 o'clock. He looked at the gray sky and tried to convince himself it wasn't worth it. But the emptiness in his stomach and the memory of Patrick's steady gaze pushed him to his feet. He reached the building 5 minutes early. Patrick was outside, sitting on a folding chair, sipping coffee from a paper cup. When he saw Marcus, he rose slowly without smiling. "Thought you wouldn't show," he said, opening the gate. "Let's see if you can do something worthwhile." Inside, Patrick handed him a bucket of warm water, soap, and a large brush. "Start by cleaning what you did yesterday. All of it." His voice carried no anger, just determination. Marcus looked at the wall, now with its colors blurred by the rain. It looked even uglier than the night before. The dripping paint gave it a destroyed, sad feel. He grabbed the brush, dunked it into the bucket, and began scrubbing. The strong smell of paint mixed with soap made him cough. Patrick watched, arms crossed. "You know why this place matters?" he asked, breaking the silence. Marcus didn't answer. "Because it's one of the last places in the city that still reminds people they have worth. When we lose that, we lose everything." Marcus kept scrubbing, feeling his fingers turn red and cold. With each stain that came off, the brick underneath reappeared as if the wall was breathing again. But something about the process unsettled him, a mix of guilt and pride he couldn't explain. After nearly an hour, Patrick clapped his hands. "That's enough for today on this part." He grabbed 2 pieces of bread and a jar of peanut butter from an improvised shelf. "Eat something." Marcus hesitated, but his stomach won the argument. While he ate, Patrick opened a cardboard box and began pulling out brushes, rollers, and sealed paint cans. "We're going to paint again, but this time, the right way." Marcus raised his eyebrows. "The right way?" he asked with his mouth full. "Yeah, with permission, purpose, and quality." They spent the morning painting together, covering worn sections of the wall with a neutral color. Patrick explained simple techniques, showed how to hold the roller to avoid streaks, and Marcus, though he wouldn't admit it, enjoyed learning. During a break, Patrick turned on an old radio. A soft soul song filled the air. Marcus looked at the photos on the wall and asked, almost without realizing, "And the woman in the photo? What happened to her?" Patrick was silent for a few seconds, eyes fixed on the floor. "Her name was Denise Parker. She was my friend. Died too soon, but left work that changed a lot of lives." Marcus wanted to ask more, but Patrick's expression shut like a door. They went back to painting. By the end of the day, the wall was clean and primed for something new. Patrick handed Marcus a sheet of paper and a pencil. "Tomorrow I want you to bring me a drawing of what you think should be here. If it's good, maybe we'll paint it. If it's bad, you go back to cleaning." Marcus put the paper in his pocket, feeling it was more of a test than an invitation. He left the building at dusk, the smell of fresh paint clinging to his clothes. As he walked, he thought about what to draw, but the ideas tangled with street memories and faces he preferred to forget. At the intersection, he saw a boy he vaguely knew, Darnell, leaning against a post. Darnell lived like him, but always carried a smile like he owed nothing to anyone. "Heard you've been messing with the old guy downtown," Darnell said, spitting on the ground. "Careful. People like that always want something in return." Marcus didn't reply. Darnell laughed, shook his head, and walked away, but his words lingered. When Marcus reached the spot where he usually slept, he pulled the paper from his pocket and began sketching under the weak glow of a streetlight. Halfway through, he realized he was drawing something he'd never shown anyone, the face of a young woman, paint stains on her hands, identical to the photo in the building's hall. He stopped, breathing fast, trying to remember where that image had come from so clearly in his mind. But before he could understand, a gust of wind snatched the paper away, vanishing into the darkness. Marcus woke before sunrise, but not by choice. The dawn chill had seeped through the thin fabric of his coat, and hunger had pulled him from the little sleep he'd managed. He was still unsettled by the image he had drawn the night before, the face of the young woman with paint-stained hands. The memory felt older than he was, as if it belonged to something he didn't know he knew. Without the paper, carried away by the wind, he was left only with the memory of the drawing. He decided he wouldn't bring anything to Patrick. Deep down, he feared Patrick's reaction. He walked slowly to the building, his footsteps blending with the distant hum of cars on the interstate. Patrick was already there, cleaning the floor of the hall. When Marcus walked in, the man lifted his eyes, sizing him up from head to toe. "Where's the drawing?" he asked bluntly. "Lost it," Marcus replied, the word coming out weaker than he wanted. Patrick didn't react right away. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked to one of the tables against the wall. From a folder, He pulled out an old photograph and placed it in front of Marcus. "Recognize her?" he asked. It was the same woman from the larger photo on the wall, but now she was smiling at the camera while painting a colorful mural. Her gaze seemed to pierce through time. Marcus swallowed hard. "I think I've seen her," he murmured. Patrick narrowed his eyes as if trying to figure out whether that was true. Her name was Denise Parker. She painted this building, ran workshops, saved street kids, and she was forgotten far too quickly. Marcus wanted to ask how she had died, but something in Patrick's tone suggested it wasn't a good idea. Instead, Patrick pulled out a pad of blank sheets and slid it toward him. "Sit. You're going to draw here. Now." Marcus's hand trembled slightly as he gripped the pencil. At first the lines were shapeless, but, as if it were inevitable, the strokes began to reveal Denise's face again, almost identical to the photograph, but with details that weren't there. Faint expression lines, a scarf tied around her head, eyes fixed on something unseen in the original image. When he finished, Patrick was standing behind him, silent. "How did you know that?" the man asked, his voice lower. "I don't know," Marcus replied, and it was true. "It just came out that way." Patrick took the drawing, studied it for a few seconds, then placed it gently on the table. "Let's paint." The whole morning was spent sketching the mural on the building's outer wall. Patrick supervised but let Marcus create freely. Some passing locals stopped to watch, curious. An elderly woman with white hair stopped and stared at the drawing for a long time. Then, her voice trembling, she said, "My God, it's Denise. Just like the last summer before she..." The sentence trailed off. She covered her mouth with her hand and slowly walked away. Marcus looked at Patrick, expecting him to explain, but the man simply said, "Keep going." By the time the sun began to set, the mural was halfway done. Marcus was covered in paint, exhausted, but something inside him had quieted. As they put away the materials, Patrick looked at him with a different expression. "Tomorrow, after we paint, I want to show you something. It's about Denise, but not here." Marcus frowned. "What is it?" Patrick just put on his hat and said, "You'll see." That night, Marcus returned to his corner on the street but couldn't sleep. The question of how he had managed to draw Denise so precisely burned in his mind. Even more so, what did Patrick want to show him the next day? In the morning, they went back to work on the mural. By late afternoon, Patrick closed the gate and said, "Let's go." They walked together through narrow streets until they reached a small, disused warehouse. Patrick opened the door with an old key, revealing a dusty space full of boxes. The air was heavy, smelling of damp wood and forgotten years. In the corner stood a shelf covered by an old sheet. Patrick pulled the fabric away, revealing something that made Marcus step back. A row of paintings, all signed with the same name, Denise Parker, and in one of them, a life-size portrait showed a child of about 5 years old, with the same eyes and the same smile as Marcus. The portrait felt alive. Marcus stared at the painting of the child as if it were his own reflection, but made many decades earlier. The short hair, the shape of the face, even the tilt of the chin, everything looked uncannily familiar. The silence in the air was so thick he could almost hear his own heartbeat. Patrick, standing a few steps away, watched him closely, as if this reaction confirmed something he had suspected. Who is this kid?" Marcus asked. Patrick took a deep breath. "I don't know if the name will mean anything to you, but that boy's name was Thomas Brown." The surname hit Marcus like a muted blow. "Brown?" "Yes. He lived in this neighborhood in the 50s. He was orphaned young and was one of the first children Denise helped. She used to say he had talent and that one day he'd change a lot of lives." Patrick paused. "Thomas was your grandfather?" Marcus blinked rapidly, trying to process. He had almost no information about his own family. His mother spoke little about the past, and after she disappeared for good, all that remained were scattered fragments of stories that never fit together. Patrick opened a box and pulled out an old notebook. On several pages, Denise had sketched Thomas's face each time in more detail, as if she were watching him grow. Denise believed in him, so much so that she painted this portrait when he was 10 years old. It was like a symbol of what the future could be. Marcus ran his hand along the outline of the painting, feeling its rough texture. "But why show me this?" Patrick replied without hesitation. "Because when you painted Denise yesterday, you gave her a spark in her eyes that is exactly here, in your grandfather. I don't know if it's coincidence, But I do know not everyone carries that. The weight of the revelation hung between them. Marcus tried to imagine what this grandfather he'd never met was like, and why his story was buried in that warehouse. Patrick closed the notebook and put it away carefully. There's more you need to know, but not today. Marcus wanted to push, but Patrick ended the conversation. Tomorrow, after we finish the mural, I'll take you to a place. There you'll understand. They left the warehouse in silence. The street was wet from a light drizzle, and the neighborhood seemed quieter than usual. On the way back, Marcus felt that for the first time, there was a thread connecting his past to something tangible. That night he tried to sleep, but the images of Thomas and Denise alternated in his mind. When morning came, he knew he would return. Only when he reached the building, he found the gate open, and Patrick, gone. The gate swayed slightly, creaking in the morning wind. Marcus stepped into the building calling Patrick's name, but there was no answer. The hall looked different. The paint cans were stacked. The unfinished mural seemed emptier than the day before, and on the table where they usually worked, there was only a brown envelope, his name written on it by hand. He opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a small bundle of folded papers. Patrick's handwriting was firm. Marcus, if you're reading this, it's because I had to go take care of something that couldn't wait. What I told you about Thomas is only part of the story. He was like a brother to me. Denise saved me, and she saved him too. But Thomas disappeared far too soon. Now, I believe you carry not only his blood, but also the chance to continue what he started. The letter went on, ending with a hastily written address and an instruction. Look for Lorraine, she knows where the keys to the rest are. Marcus looked at the folded papers. They were old documents, a birth certificate in the name of Thomas Brown, newspaper clippings about Denise's murals, and in the middle of them, a faded color photograph. In the photo, Thomas, now an adult, was holding a baby in his arms, his expression proud and protective. On the back, a single handwritten word, Michael. Marcus's heart skipped a beat. Michael was the name of the father he had never met. His legs felt weak, and he leaned on the table. Everything seemed to make sense and not make sense at all, at the same time. He not only had a connection to Denise, but was discovering that his own father had walked those same streets, maybe even stood in that very building. He took the envelope and went to the address written there. It was a simple house painted light blue with a small unkempt garden. An elderly woman opened the door. You must be Marcus, she said before he could say anything. Patrick told me you'd be coming. She led him into a narrow room where, on a worn-out couch, there was a wooden box locked with a padlock. Lorraine handed him a small rusty key. Patrick said, this belongs to you now. Marcus opened the box. Inside were old paintbrushes, a paint-stained apron, and several sketchbooks. On top, a smaller sealed envelope. He opened it and found a letter in delicate handwriting. If you're reading this, I may no longer be here, but I want you to know, the talent you have didn't come from nowhere. It comes from people who loved this neighborhood, who fought for it, and who believed that art could save lives. Among them, your grandfather and me. Use that talent, Marcus, not to leave your mark on the world, but to change the world around you. Denise Parker. Marcus closed his eyes, gripping the letter tightly. He felt warmth rise in his chest, mixed with a deep sadness and a determination he had never felt before. Lorraine touched his shoulder and pointed outside. The mural is waiting. In the following days, Marcus returned to the building alone. He finished the mural in vivid colors depicting not only Denise, but also Thomas and anonymous faces from the neighborhood. When it was done, the inauguration drew residents, journalists, and curious onlookers. In the crowd, he spotted a middle-aged woman standing at a distance, crying as she looked at the mural. Before Marcus could approach her, she turned and disappeared into the people. Someone tapped his arm. It was a man in a simple suit, who introduced himself as the director of a youth arts foundation. I saw what you did. I'd like to talk to you about a scholarship. And not only that, he hesitated, as if weighing his words. I think I can tell you something about your father. Marcus stood still, his heart pounding. The noise of the crowd faded for a moment. He looked at the mural, at Denise's letter in his pocket, and at the man's outstretched hand. And in that moment he realized that maybe the door Patrick had opened wasn't just about the past, but about everything still to come. He shook the man's hand, not knowing exactly where it would lead. But for the first time, he wasn't afraid to find out. Do you also believe a simple encounter can change the course of an entire life? Tell me in the comments if you've ever lived through something like this or know someone who has. If this story touched you, hit the like button now and subscribe so you won't miss what comes next. Because every new story can reveal truths we never imagined.